How's it going, guys? My name is Valued, and today I'm here to show you some of the most important settings in Apex, whether you're console or PC. Going through all the gameplay options can be intense if you don't know what to look for. So I've done all the research for you, and it's time to perfect your settings. Where better to start than the settings that impact your gameplay? This section of your settings has a lot of personal preference, but there are some big ones in here, so follow along. I'm going to do my best to give you guys a nice explanation of each of these settings without getting too in-depth. We want to get you back on your grind as soon as possible. The first big one here is your crosshair damage feedback. This is going to give you hit markers when you're landing shots, with the option to also show shield level. If you find yourself wanting more visual clarity in your gunfights, consider turning this off. A lot of players play with this option disabled because it can make hitting consistent shots on an enemy a little bit easier, especially from long ranges. Keep in mind, you need to get used to properly reading your damage numbers and recognizing that you're actually dealing damage without the feedback. But if you're comfortable with it, it can be a very good change. Also keep in mind that legends with traps like Caustic or Watson actually have these hit markers show up when their traps activate. This can make it a lot easier to know if enemies are hitting your traps, especially if you're out of their line of sight or you have a lot of distance between you and your traps. If you're playing these legends a lot, then maybe consider keeping it on, but if not and you're looking for some extra clarity in your crosshair, try turning it off and see how you like it. Personally, I play off. Next up, set those damage numbers to stacking. You don't have time to whip out the calculator and make sure you're adding up the damage right every time you're landing your shots. So do yourself a favor and make this change. With stacking, the game will do all the math for you, only showing one number that indicates your total damage dealt within the recent time frame. This makes it a lot easier to be confident about how much HP your enemies have, and that confidence is key when you're making split-second decisions in-game. Next up, we have minimap rotation. Make sure this is set to off. This will help you for multiple reasons. First, you'll always be able to see the map for what it is. When you play with this on, it can be confusing to track the map and especially track yourself and your team on the map. Additionally, honestly, it could be a headache when your minimap is moving around the entire time and you're trying to track it. So, for the sake of simplicity and easy tracking, I prefer this set to off. Settings aren't the only thing in Apex that you need to fix to become a great player. The best way to improve fast is to learn from the best. So, here's an exclusive message from the CEO of Apex Legends himself, Imperial Hal.
Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Imperial Hal, I'm a top pro for Apex Legends, and welcome to my brand new Apex class. This class goes over everything you need to improve across every aspect of Apex Legends. How to move, shoot, and think like me. By the end of this class, you're going to feel more confident when you play. And you'll learn everything you need to win more games. You're going to be the one carrying your friends. I can't wait to meet you guys and help you reach your full potential in Apex. See you soon.
All right, guys, moving on, we have auto sprint. Auto sprint can feel very nice because you're not constantly having to hit your sprint button. But there are viable situations where you actually don't want to be sprinting. Examples of this can include being in a Seer ultimate, or trying to be sneaky and rat out a game, or just creep up and flank in a crouch because it's harder to be heard. While you don't walk that often in Apex, you will want to at times. So I'd recommend getting used to having auto sprint off. All right, guys, this next one is very important, so make sure if you change one setting at all from this video, this is it. Make sure you turn off the option for Deathbox to close when you receive damage. This will take some time to get used to, and you'll probably get killed in a Deathbox once or twice once you change this, but it can seriously be huge for your gameplay. This allows you to loot a Deathbox beyond taking damage, and that extra half a second you can get out of this setting can mean the difference between you quickly shield swapping off a box or you getting that battery that you desperately need. We've all seen a high-level player pull off some crazy shield swaps, right? Well, this setting is where they all started. So get used to popping in and out of Deathbox quickly, and you will be shield swapping on fools in no time. Okay, guys, so the next one, performance display. This one should be set to on. This setting will make a little info box stay on your screen in the top right, showing you some info about your system's current performance. Your ping and FPS are really what you want to see here, and having this up can help you make sure your internet isn't going boom and your frames aren't dropping too low for some reason. The next time you're having lag, you can easily just check your ping or your FPS and safely determine if it's just a server or if you have an issue on your end. It's a small thing, but personally, this can give you some much needed peace of mind, and I love having this setting on. Alright guys, so before we move on from the gameplay section, we have to talk about the last setting here, which is colorblind settings. These settings will change everything from your UI colors to your reticle color, so there might be a better option for you than the default. A lot of pros use tritanopia, largely because it changes the color of your optics to yellow instead of red. Yellow is generally an easier color to see for people, and this reticle change applies to both iron sights and attachable sights for your weapons. It may seem small, but playing with these settings until you find the colors that you can really track well may have a large impact on your game that you haven't thought about before. If you guys came to this video hoping to get the best settings specifically for your keyboard and mouse, no worries. Sadly, we're not going to cover it here because we've literally made full videos dedicated to each input. I'll pop those up on screen now. If you're looking to change your controller settings or your mouse and keyboard sensitivities and keybinds, make sure to check these 2 videos out. Alright guys, now we're moving on to the video settings. This is where you're going to make changes that will drastically impact your visibility in-game as well as how smooth your game runs. With all of us playing on different devices, these settings can be pretty different depending on how much power you have in your rig. For console players, you're going to be on the lower end of performance with your system having less power, and therefore you have less options of how to use that power. For most PC players, you're still going to be on the low to middle end of the spectrum, and for you high-end PC players, you can likely get away with some higher settings here if you wish. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to make recommendations based on the highest frames possible and the clearest in-game visuals. You can use most of these settings for every single system, and I'll point out any specific places where this is an exception. First up, we're going to talk about field of view. This setting will lower your frames a bit by turning it up, but it also helps you see more info on your screen the further up you go. I personally like high FOV, but keep in mind this can make enemies appear a bit smaller at long range if you have it cranked up to 110. I prefer my FOV to be anywhere from 94 to 108 because at 108 you don't get the fisheye effect, and on 94 the game doesn't look too zoomed in. What matters here is you generally want a higher FOV so you can take in more info, and you want your ADS sense to match your FOV changes. I would strongly recommend trying 108 FOV with a 1.3 ADS sensitivity, and dial in your sensitivity from there. The same goes for console players as well. Make sure you bump your ADS sense up just a smidge to account for this increase in FOV in your settings. You want your sensitivity to feel the same when you're aiming down sights as it does when you aren't. You also want to make sure you turn off FOV ability scaling as well, because this will change your field of view when you're using certain abilities. Different FOV means different sensitivity, so make sure this is off to streamline your sense in all scenarios. Next, make sure you set sprint view shake to minimal. Realistic? Sure. Helpful? Definitely not. Next up, Vsync. Vsync should definitely be disabled. This setting can smooth out any screen tearing, so if you're on a lower end system, you can turn this on, but the big reason you want this off is because it can cause you to have input lag, which is the last thing you want for a fast-paced FPS like Apex. So if you can run with Vsync off, make sure to turn it off. For you PC users, if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, kick on the reflex option to on plus boost. This feature can greatly reduce your input lag and is a great perk of you using these graphics cards. So if it's available to you, make sure to use it because this setting is a life changer. Alright, so for the rest of your video settings, you're gonna want to generally look to lower them as much as possible if you're looking for the best performance and visibility. While all the graphics options in the game can make the game look really good, most of them actually make seeing enemies a lot harder. Not to mention, the lower your settings are, the more frames you will get, regardless of how powerful your system is. So across the board, lower your settings as far as it will go and see how you like it. You can always raise some of the setting models like model detail or texture streaming budget if you're looking for a bit more visual prowess, but I really urge you guys to get used to the game on low setting. If you have a monster system that can get the maximum frames your monitor can handle on some higher settings, then go for it. But even then, you will add visual clutter by bumping your settings up from their base level. The biggest offenders here are the options involving shadows, the sun, and visual effects. So if you're serious about improving at the game and want the most optimal settings, I'd recommend keeping them low. If you want your game to be a bit prettier and you don't care much about every little optimization, then feel free to play around a bit. The last thing I'll mention here is, if you're on PC, you should cap your FPS at 190. To do this, you need to create an auto-exec file, and there's full videos on YouTube about how to do this. The reason you cap at 190 is because Apex can't truly handle 240 FPS. Alright guys, and that's every major setting that you need to change for Apex Legends. The settings can be overwhelming, But if you followed along today, then you should have them nice and dialed in to help you find success. What we touched on today are the major options that will improve your performance and your ability to play the game. Let everybody know in the comment section which setting was the biggest one for you. Anyway, my name's Invalued, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.